Let me go back to my guest, Ambassador. You're still with us on the broadcast. I just wanted to ask you, among some of the sticking points perhaps for not just Prime Minister Modi, but many of the leaders today who are going to be having discussions in Osaka, from Iran to energy to 5G to protectionism. A lot of these issues hinge on the United States and its leader, President Donald Trump. Ever since he has come to power, things have seen tectonic shifts, if you will, when it comes to global policy and the way transactions take place between countries. Do you find this extremely interesting at a time when we're seeing Prime Minister Modi just starting off on his new tenure as the Indian Prime Minister for a second term? And of course, there are elections coming up in different countries, and a lot of the election rhetoric in a number of these countries hinges on how relationships are going to be forged and shaped when it comes to bilaterals with the United States.
Well, I think what is happening today is that because of the digital revolution, why is 5G such a high priority? Because that is going to be the next sort of horizon for the digital connectivity, and it's going to be global because all countries are now connected. Now, the point that the Americans are making that they don't trust 5G because they feel that it will give China access to the networks for sucking out whatever data and secrets that these networks sort of communicate. So that is why they want to shut out China from this network. And they are asking their friends and allies, look, if we are strategic partners, then you can't have 5G. I mean, you cannot deal with 5G because we don't trust 5G. We don't trust China. And so I think there is obviously this kind of a trade war and a technology denial war going on between the US and China, and other countries are getting sucked into it. I think Prime Minister also, and I think the Foreign Secretary mentioned it, that we are also interested that, why should we import a foreign sort of a 5G technology if we can develop it on our own? And I think President Trump, in fact, I think on this point reassured on the Silicon Valley and technology that, look, we can work together to develop these kind of systems. We have the capacities, the US certainly has, India also has to some extent. So I think that is on the technology and 5G sector, this is the argument that is going on. And I think at the summit level, the emphasis was really, look, we are strategic partners, we have a strong relationship, and we need to work through these issues. I don't think any solutions have been found yet, but I think what will happen now is that the two leaders have given certain directives that please go back to the drawing board, find out solutions. So I think what will happen is give and take and some compromises. If President Trump focuses on rolling back some of the Indian tariffs, then I think India will have to consider that. And the Americans will have to consider waiver for the S-400 and energy security, some kind of either ensuring that India gets enough oil and gas from other sources,
sure,
or allowing India to import from Iran as a special sort of a waiver. So these are the kind of issues that will be, there'll be a cross-domain, there'll be discussions across domain, and I think then some kind of a give and take we will arrive at. That I'm quite sure that they will work this thing through.
Indeed. And your thoughts, Ambassador, on the S-400 not coming up for discussion, even though we know for a fact that when the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited India, this was one of the major sticking points, and there was a discussion that took place between the Minister of External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar, and the Secretary of State Pompeo.
I think our External Affairs Minister Jaishankar must have conveyed to Secretary Pompeo that the S-400 is non-negotiable for India, that we are not going to go back on this deal, and that is something they will have to find a way out. Because, as I said, if we agree on a strategic relationship, then they have to find solutions to our requirements and our sort of the S-400 deal in particular. our requirement of defense hardware. So I think what will happen, or what could happen, is that they will find a way out, and the easiest way out is to give a waiver for this. Maybe an ad hoc one-time waiver, but I think this is going to happen, and then in which case India may also offer some concessions on the trade side. India may offer some concessions on other issues, but I don't think at this moment we have any particular solutions. It will have to be worked through, as Foreign Secretary was saying, and as External Affairs Minister said in Delhi during the Pompeo visit. So we are at this stage at the moment where this is the kind of indicators that are being given from this summit.
Indeed. Let's move on from Donald Trump. He's going to be coming up for discussion, I'm sure, over the course of the next day or so. But Prime Minister Modi also has a bilateral coming up this morning with the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. How significant is that meeting, sir?
Well, I think they have a good equation because Crown Prince Salman has visited Delhi, and Prime Minister Modi has visited Saudi Arabia. We have a very robust energy relationship with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a major trading partner, and also we have a lot of our nationals working in that country, over 2 million or so. So I think that relationship is important, primarily because of the energy and the Indians who are working there, and of course trade and economic. Saudi Arabia is what shall we say, has investment surpluses in the sense that it has surpluses to invest, and I think Saudi Arabia is interested in investing in India. We had heard about their massive investment in the oil refinery sector. So I think those are the issues that will come up. And I think Iran will be discussed with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia will no doubt raise Iran, saying that we are very worried about Iran, what Iran is doing. And in fact, Saudi Arabia, as we know, is very much a part of the coalition with America and UAE and Israel to counter Iran. And I think they will be asking India to sort of take care of their interests vis-a-vis Iran. And I think India will have to do some navigating. Unfortunately, the sanctions on Iran are there, and we are unable to buy oil from Iran. So Iran is being squeezed, and so this is a problem area. What we are interested, I think, in the Gulf is that it should not be destabilized in a manner that a shooting war can. I mean, if there is violence breaks out, the shooting, bombing, etc., then I think we are in trouble, because then the oil supplies from that region will get affected, and all economies will get affected all over the world. So the world economy will then plunge into some kind of a recession,
sure.
And I think everybody will suffer on that account.
Very quickly, sir, before we wrap, I wanted to ask you, just going by the term that you used, the word navigating, and that is an interesting way of looking at how India is going to have to chart these waters, so to speak, because later in the day, there's also a meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin for Prime Minister Modi, and Russia very categorically has batted for Iran for more reasons than one when it comes to this standoff with the United States. Russia also a country that has a very old and strategic partnership with India, specifically when we're looking at the S-400 deal as well. So how do you see all of these contours shaping Prime Minister Modi's interactions, especially with President Putin later today?
Well, I think Russia and China are batting for Iran. There is no doubt about it. And there is some justification for them to do that. And to an extent, India is also batting for Iran, in the sense that we don't want these sanctions. We want to buy oil from Iran. To that extent, India's energy requirements, etc., we are, this is in our national interest. So I think views will be exchanged on that. I think I think all these countries, that is certainly the BRICS countries and India, China, and Russia will not war and will not want any sort of destabilization of that region, to the extent that I said that it sort of disrupts oil supplies. I think all of them are concerned about that. and not so much Russia, because Russia is sort of self-sufficient in oil and gas, but China certainly is. And Russia, of course, for geopolitical reasons, will be backing Iran, in the sense that, you see, there is a divide there in that region. I think the Gulf states led by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and they have even gravitated on this, with Israel and America, to set up a kind of a loose coalition against Iran. And Iran, on the other hand, is getting help from Russia and China. But the idea is that to keep it controlled, in the sense that somehow find a way out. In fact, President Trump has offered talks with Iran, but obviously the Iranians have rejected it. But there is some opening, because the Iranians have announced that they are not crossing the limits set for uranium enrichment in the JCPOA, the agreement that was signed, which was rejected, and Trump walked out of that agreement, and which led to all this kind of this situation. Now, why is this happening? I think Israel is a factor, and Trump thinks that the Iranians are deeply involved in Syria. So I think the Syrian factor will also come up here. I mean, what to do with Syria? Because the Iranians are involved in Syria,
yes,
in helping President Assad against the, ISIS and other kind of elements that are there. It's a complicated situation there. So I think there will be, all these factors will be coming into play. And there is even talk of, I think, some kind of a compromise on Syria. I think recently there was a meeting in Israel between the Americans, the Russians, and the Israelis, which indicate that there could be some sort of a consensus or some agreements emerging on Syria, and maybe even Iran. I don't know whether they can agree to some deal on Iran. The best would be, of course, to go back to the drawing board and to the negotiating table with Iran. But I think at the moment it seems that both sides are taking very rigid positions. Well, there are some openings that I can see.